Suppose you are going to travel to Thailand. If you want to book a hotel online, you usually have to make the payment in US dollars. You may be able to pay in other currencies as well, but paying in dollars is easier and more widely accepted. That is at the individual level. At the state level, when one country buys goods from another country, in most cases the payment is made in US dollars. For example, Bangladesh imports various goods from abroad, and almost all of these imports are paid for in dollars. Similarly, when Bangladesh exports goods, the value is usually received in dollars. If you like the videos of the World Archive, please be sure to like, comment, and share. In this way, more than 80% of global transactions are conducted using the US dollar. The American dollar effectively controls the world economy. The question is, does it have to be this way? Is there no alternative? Can China's currency, the yuan, or Russia's currency, the ruble, serve as an alternative to the US dollar? This question has become even more prominent since the Ukraine war. For many years, the global economy and trade were based on the gold standard. During World War II, the United States sold military and other supplies to its allies, and the payments were made in gold. As a result, about 70% of the world's gold reserves ended up in the hands of the United States. After World War II, 40 Allied countries came together and signed an agreement known as the Bretton Woods Agreement. It was decided that the exchange rates of different countries' currencies would be determined based on the US dollar, while the value of the US dollar itself would be fixed to gold. At that time, the United States was the only major wealthy country that had not been directly affected by the war. Europe, on the other hand, was devastated. Since the U.S. held the largest share of the world's gold reserves and the dollar was stable because it was backed by gold, the 40 countries agreed to keep the U.S. dollar as their foreign exchange reserve currency. This marked the beginning of dollar dominance. In 1971, U.S. President Richard Nixon announced that the value of the dollar would no longer be backed by gold. To maintain global dominance and increase demand for the dollar, the United States made an agreement with Saudi Arabia in 1973. According to this agreement, Saudi Arabia would sell oil only in U.S. dollars, and in return, the United States would guarantee Saudi Arabia's security against attacks from neighboring countries. In 1975, other oil-producing countries under the Organization of the Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC, made a similar decision. This meant that oil would be sold exclusively in U.S. dollars. For the past 6 years, Saudi Arabia and China have been discussing whether the oil that Saudi Arabia exports to China could be paid for in China's currency, the yuan, instead of the dollar. The discussion gained renewed momentum during the Ukraine war. About 25% of Saudi Arabia's oil exports go to China, but the two countries have not yet reached an agreement on abandoning the dollar in their transactions. Analysts say this is unlikely to happen anytime soon. Over the past 500 years, the dominant global currencies have belonged to Portugal, then Spain, then the Netherlands, followed by France, and later Britain. After that came the dominance of the US dollar. There is a common saying that no empire lasts forever, and the same may apply to the US dollar. Since the Ukraine war, this question has once again gained attention. When one country buys goods from another country, payment is usually made in dollars. After sanctions were imposed on Russia, the country announced that those who buy its oil and gas must pay in the Russian currency, the ruble. China and Russia have long been talking about introducing a new global currency as an alternative to the dollar. But so far, these efforts have not succeeded. They want a currency that would not be controlled by any single country. Many people once believed that China's yuan could become an alternative to the dollar, but that has not yet been possible. Due to the policies and transparency of the U.S. economy, businesses and investors continue to place their trust in the dollar. China's yuan, Russia's ruble, and Europe's euro could, in theory, become competitors to the dollar, but in reality, this has not happened. One reason is that the yuan and the ruble are not determined purely by market forces. Government intervention plays a significant role. On the other hand, the euro is not controlled by any single country, and no single European nation has complete authority over it. Economists say that when all factors are considered, ease of transactions and trust, the US dollar remains in a more advantageous position than other currencies. In 2016, the International Monetary Fund recognized China's currency as one of the world's foreign exchange reserve currencies. However, IMF data shows that of all the foreign exchange reserves held by central banks around the world, only about 2.7% is held in China's currency, which is nowhere near the US dollar. The US dollar accounts for about 58.81% of global foreign exchange reserves. The euro is in second place with around 20.64%. However, IMF Deputy Managing Director Geeta Gopinath has warned that if sanctions on Russia continue for a long time, it could be harmful to the US dollar itself. Speaking to the UK-based Financial Times, she said that the dollar will remain the most dominant global currency, but some countries will begin using other currencies for trade purposes. Countries may reduce the amount of dollar reserves held by their central banks and increase reserves in other currencies. As a result, demand for the dollar could decline. The American multinational investment bank and financial services company Goldman Sachs recently stated in a report that the current situation facing the US dollar resembles the conditions the British pound faced before it lost its dominance in the 19th and 20th centuries. Goldman Sachs pointed out that due to sanctions imposed by the US and Europe, Russia is unable to use nearly half of its foreign exchange reserves, which were held in dollars and euros. Following this event, many countries may reduce their dependence on the dollar as a reserve currency. However, this shift is not happening immediately. Economists believe that it may take several more decades for the dominance of the dollar to significantly decline. Still, since the Ukraine war, discussions and efforts in this direction have clearly intensified, observers say. If you like the videos of the World Archive, please be sure to like, comment, and share.